Thanks for joining us today for the University Interdisciplinary Colloquium. Today, though, we're very pleased to have with us Dr. Laura Dilley. Dr. Dilley received her BS in Brain and Cognitive Sciences in 1997 from MIT, and her PhD in Speech and Hearing Biosciences and Technology from MIT and Harvard in 2005. Her research focuses on the cognitive underpinnings of and capacities for spoken language, including speech development and use in both neurotypical and neuroatypical populations. Her research is built on the foundations of social cognitive neuroscience to better understand spoken communication in context, including the role of cognitive bias, and personality factors, and language perception and understanding. She is the author of over 85 peer-reviewed publications. She's been an invited speaker at multiple conferences and venues worldwide, including serving as the keynote speaker for Speech Prosody 2016 in Boston and the Rumelhart Symposium in Cognitive Science in 2018. While locked down under the COVID pandemic, the way she describes it, she began studying propaganda and disinformation on the social media platform Twitter. A project about COVID disinformation turned into a focus on online propaganda during a US election year, 2020. This research will appear soon in the journal Frontiers in Communication, and it is also the focus of our talk today, QAnon propaganda on Twitter as information warfare. Dr. Dilley.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank the MSU Center for Interdisciplinarity for providing a forum for cross-disciplinary academic talks such as this one. And my goal is to provide an overview of some recent and historical current events and to provide a synthesis while sharing my own research. The title of my talk is QAnon Propaganda on Twitter as Information Warfare, Influencers, Networks, and Narratives. I'm going to describe some studies done by myself and colleagues just accepted for publication in the journal Frontiers in Communication. And the context for this work is widespread weaponization of social media, which we have seen in recent years. Platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube have become an emerging threat to the stability of democracies around the world. And informed citizens have learned the hard way that social media tools like these are highly vulnerable to use and misuse and abuse for political ends. This has been demonstrated through emergence of multiple examples of powerful actors running deceptive, unethical political campaigns on social media. These include the Russian government, which has invested early in social media platforms, as revealed by tech entrepreneur Yuri Milner's early investment in Facebook and Flattery of its CEO. Together, the Russian government-linked oligarchs indisputably ran sophisticated influence operations on the US presidential election in 2016, which has reportedly continued through 2020. Another example is the collaboration between Trump operative Steve Bannon and arch-conservative billionaires Robert Mercer and his daughter Rebecca to create psychological warfare weapons, in the words of whistleblower Christopher Wiley. I am linking to the talk, the interview that he gives with The Guardian, where he describes his remarkable experiences, in case you care to follow that up. The inadequacy of measures employed by social media companies to mitigate these election influence operations has only become more glaringly obvious with additional whistleblowers coming forward, such as Francis. Better?
That's it.
Thank you.
Great.
So what is QAnon and how does it relate to tech tool misuse? To begin to answer that question, I'm going to play a couple of clips from a 60 Minutes episode from February 2021, shortly after the insurrection at the US Capitol.
The ideology of QAnon has captured the minds and imaginations of tens of millions of Americans. Their core belief: a global cabal, including Democrats, Hollywood elites, and members of what they call the deep state, control much of our lives. The cabal commits atrocities, including pedophilia, Satan worship, and cannibalizing children. But it will be vanquished by Donald Trump in an apocalyptic day called the Storm. QAnon was born when an anonymous character named Q began posting cryptic riddles in an online forum known for hosting hateful and racist content. The movement prospered in pandemic isolation. Its followers occasionally erupting in acts of violence, culminating in the assault on the Capitol. But the prophesied storm never happened. Instead, Donald Trump left office, and QAnon followers have found themselves at a moment of truth.
The story will continue in a moment.
QAnon supporters charged into battle with the crowd storming the Capitol on January 6th. Some were easy to spot with their Q signs and Q chants. Nearly 1 in 10 of those arrested had a QAnon connection. And like the movement overall, they were men and women, often older. There was a federal employee, a business owner who covered his store in a QAnon mural, and a real estate agent who arrived by private plane. A survey by the conservative American Enterprise Institute found more than a quarter of white evangelical Protestants and nearly 1 in 5 white Catholics believe the QAnon conspiracy.
So this talk focuses on several present dilemmas and motivations. First of all, how did QAnon grow rapidly into a powerful, radicalizing socio-political movement? Also, who are some of the individuals and groups implicated in promoting QAnon? What do their activities on social media contribute to understanding QAnon's surprising rise? And also, a big question is, was QAnon propaganda strictly grassroots, involving citizens acting independently, as some journalists have claimed, or did it receive boosting through Astroturfing on social media? So these are some questions that I intend to answer. The outline of my talk is as follows. I'm first going to frame the why and how around some scholarly work. I then am going to present background on QAnon's gestalt of narratives and influencers. And finally, I'll present some overviews of studies on Twitter networks of QAnon influencers on Twitter and QAnon propaganda. To begin, framing the why and how, I'm going to take you through some information on memes and information warfare, conceptual blind spots in democracies, tech-enabled shifts in power, and digital influence mercenaries. So for me, keeping occupied during COVID lockdown in an election year rife with social media disinformation launched me into novel areas of study, which became this project. My scholarly home turf is as an expert in language, cognition, and communication, from which I'm acutely aware that linguistic and visual content can influence thought and emotion. Like other academics concerned about destabilizing and destructive uses of social media, I asked myself, how has it been the case that powerful corporate and nation state actors have created these efficient political campaigns to undermine our democracy? But part of the answer relates to memes. The word meme has only recently gained a prominent place in our lexicons, and we tend to think of memes as faddish adolescent visual content on the internet with an edgy, humorous, offensive, or even hateful message, as exemplified by this Pepe meme. However, the broader definition of a meme actually is much broader, in that a meme can be defined as an idea, behavior, style, or style that spreads by means of imitation from person to person within a culture, often carrying symbolic meaning. Communication involves transmission of information, and that information, including the memes therein, can be weaponized to deliberately alter cognition and beliefs of a populace, which social media makes possible at grand scales. Indeed, Jeff Gizea is an organizer of the so-called alt-right, which is the American ethno-nationalist movement, and as well as for Donald Trump affiliated causes. He's worked with arch libertarian Peter Thiel and Mike Cernovich, as well as self-described neo-Nazi Andrew Ehrenhauer, or Weave, as he's known in for his hacker name. He even wrote a paper called "It's Time to Embrace Memetic Warfare" in this journal, Defense Strategic Communications. To better understand the context of the memetic warfare, we can consider some quotes from academics. For example, information warfare exploits open society's freedoms of speech, access to information, movement, and more to turn societies against themselves, creating chaos and breeding suspicion. A complementary quote relates to the broader ways in which information is shaped. Koba states, at the moment, the truth is not that we are engaged in narrative. The truth is that we are engaged in narrative warfare with Russia, China, extremists, and many more, not information warfare. So there are complementary terms to describe what's going on in our society, but clearly there's some nefarious things going on. I next want to tell you about a blind spot in democracies. How could something like this happen? Part of the answer recently comes from academic scholarship around organized persuasive communication identified by Bakir and colleagues. So organized persuasive communication refers to persuasive activities like advertising and marketing, public relations, etc. And organized persuasive communication is essential to the democratic exercise of power at national and global levels. It's been extensively studied by scholars of public relations, propaganda, and promotional culture. However, Bakir et al. Said there exists considerable confusion and conceptual limitations across these fields. Scholars of PR largely focus on what they perceive to be non-manipulative forms of organized persuasive communication. Scholars of propaganda focus on manipulative forms, but tend either to examine historical cases or non-democratic states. Scholars of promotional culture focus on salesmanship in public life. All approaches show minimal conceptual development concerning manipulative organized persuasive communication involving deception, incentivization, and coercion. As a consequence, manipulative, propagandistic, organized persuasive communication within liberal democracies is a blind spot. Another facet of this big picture problem that we're dealing with relates to tech-enabled shifts in power. The internet and the availability of tech tools means that online activities are a new arena for political dominance as well as exertion of soft power. This includes Russia's longstanding efforts to undermine democracies, and Valery Gerasimov, the chief of general staff of the Russian armed forces, is believed to be the mastermind behind the concept of combining military, technological, information, diplomatic, economic, cultural, and other tactics for the purpose of achieving strategic goals known as the Gerasimov doctrine of hybrid warfare. This has been called a modern way of conducting a war by inducing chaos, disorder, civil war, and humanitarian catastrophe in the enemy country before a single bullet is fired. Other areas of power relate to individuals who come together in collectives such as WikiLeaks or the hacker collective Anonymous, where very technically sophisticated individuals are acting in concert to achieve goals, shifting potentially the balance of power. Another aspect of our world that has changed due to these shifts in power enabled by tech is the rise of social media influencers who create and share content, where we get the new term YouTubers. And finally, I want to tell you a little bit about digital influence warfare and digital mercenaries. So in doing background research for this project, it came to my attention that this is a big topic in that some of the leading scholars in strategic communications and military strategy are writing books on how the world is changing due to the tech tools that are now available in such widespread fashion. So here's one book, and I found that that just came out, and there's another one by the same author who publishes in journals like Journal of Advanced Military Strategy, called Digital Influence Mercenaries. So people who work for their bread and butter in disinformation have been talking about this, and I pulled one quote. States that run covert influence operations can design and implement the operation in-house, or they can outsource the work to digital mercenaries. So this idea of very sophisticated or technically adept individuals working together to affect some goal carries over to how disinformation campaigns are deployed these days. Having given you that academic background, let me now tell you more about QAnon specifically and give you a sense of the gestalt of its narratives and some of its influencers. I'm going to talk about the 2016 Russian hacking and something called Pizzagate. Then I'll talk about religion and spirituality. Then topics around the alt-right and so-called white replacement narratives. I'll mention some influencers, and then I'll define live action role play, or LARPs, and alternative reality games, or ARGs. So it is widely established that Russia interfered with the 2016 US presidential election, and Russian hackers stole emails from the Democratic National Party. Damaging disinformation narratives came out that used details from these emails, which revolved around supposed child sexual abuse or slavery and satanic rites carried out supposedly by elites and Democrats particularly. QAnon has narrative origins in the 2016 so-called Pizzagate theory. This conspiracy alleged that a Washington, D.C. area pizzeria was the operational base of a ring of pedophiles, which included prominent Democratic Party members like Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, and these individuals were supposedly also engaged in satanic rites and cannibalism. Trump affiliates, including Eric Prince and Roger Stone, promoted this disinformation, as well as individuals with their own media bases, including Alex Jones. The narratives were very compelling to some individuals and were sufficient to radicalize at least one person, a guy named Edgar Welch. I'm going to play you a clip to give you a sense of how powerful these narratives can be.
And riot SWAT teams are closing the building and the street, and leaves this gunman alone to search the restaurant or do whatever he's going to do.
The first thing that he did was immediately walk towards the back room. I'm not sure what he thought he was going to find back here, but I think that he thought that this was the place where Hillary Clinton would be, or he was going to walk back there and find John Podesta or George Soros or someone.
Came out of the restaurant, came out with his hands up to a sea of police.
Hands! Hands!
We got a guy coming out right now.
Stand up!
We got a white male subject coming out of the location. Hands in the air. Get on the ground, lay prone on the ground.
Sir, do you work there?
No, sir.
Are you
in the location right now? Nobody else.
Nobody else?
What were you doing in the location? Making sure there's nothing there. Making sure there's nothing there regarding what? Pedophile ring. Regarding what? Pedophile ring.
Pizzagate. Talking about Pizzagate.
And riot SWAT teams are
Just remarkable. And so you have a sense now of how powerful these narratives can be, actuating persons to do something. So that's one facet of our recent history that shaped QAnon narratives, which seamlessly transitioned to the idea that Donald Trump was secretly prosecuting these supposed morally corrupt Democrats and liberals. Another facet of QAnon relates to religion, spirituality, and its integration with QAnon. So QAnon ideology has also become popular not only among religious conservatives, as you heard, but also among spiritual and wellness communities. So here is a clip that illustrates how this has happened.
But yoga, meditation, and crystal healing, not typically what you'd expect from members of the far-right conspiracy group.
Okay.
how do you think QAnon became mainstream in the wellness community?
You know, where we go one, we go all. The Great Reset, the Great Happening. Where we go one, we go all. That's yoga. Oneness, unity. My liberation is bound.
Some call it pastel QAnon, a cross-section of conspiracy and spirituality thriving in the suburbs of Southern California. From the dark web and into the mainstream.
It felt like this odd trauma bond. How is something that I thought was so alt-right affecting a population that I presumed was progressive alt-left?
Another clip that I've selected to illustrate some strategy around how potentially these communities could be infiltrated by individuals wishing to change narratives and beliefs at grand scale is the following, which comes from a historical clip of a former KGB operative who defected to the West and gave a number of interviews revealing some strategies that the Russian Secret Service has deployed over time.
Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, a great spiritual leader, or maybe a great charlatan and crook, depending on from which side you're looking at him. Beatles were trained at his ashram in Hardwar in India how to meditate. Mia Farrow and other useful idiots from Hollywood visited his school, and they returned back to United States absolutely zonked out of their minds with marijuana, hashish, and crazy ideas of meditation. To meditate, in other words, to isolate oneself from the current social and political issues of your own country, to get into your own bubble, to forget about troubles of the world. Obviously, KGB was very fascinated with such a beautiful school, such a brainwashing center for stupid Americans. I was dispatched by the KGB to check what kind of VIP Americans attend this school.
That's you on the left.
Yes, I'm on the left. I was trying to get enrolled in that school. Unfortunately, the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi asked too much. He wanted $500 American for enrollment. But my function was not actually to get enrolled in the school. My function was to discover what kind of people from United States attend this school. And we discovered that, yes, there are some influential members of family, public opinion makers of United States who come back with the crazy stories about Indian philosophy. Indians themselves look upon them as idiots, useful idiots. To say nothing about KGB, who looked at them as extremely naive, misguided people. Obviously, a VIP, say a wife of a congressman or a prominent Hollywood personality, after being trained in that school, is much more instrumental in the hands of manipulators of public opinion and KGB than a normal person who understands, who looks through this type of fake.
Having now considered some of the radicalizing narratives of QAnon and its infiltration into spiritual and wellness communities, I want to also mention another relationship, an intersecting consideration that relates to QAnon, which is the alt-right, white replacement, and the occult. So QAnon has been quite popular among individuals affiliated with the American ethno-nationalist far right, or the alt-right. For example, a prominent Oath Keeper, John B. Wells, organized a benefit for Michael Flynn, where Flynn gave a famous digital soldiers speech. Also, many Proud Boys were present on January 6th. Among the alt-right and in QAnon, narratives of fear of white extinction and fear of white replacement are common. And as I started to look more and more at QAnon propaganda on Twitter, I started to see lots of elements of the occult and mysticism and spirituality blended together seemingly in some cases in a seemingly deliberate or orchestrated style. And I wondered why might this be going on? Bot 2021 provides a partial answer to this question in that he writes in a review of far-right ideologies and fascism that white extinction and white replacement narratives are evoked are evoked by metaphysical themes that are deployed in contemporary fascism. And these include occultist ideas of nature and vitalism and ideas about cosmic destiny. So this imagery of the occult, of metaphysics, of spirituality, puts people who are susceptible to white extinction and white replacement narratives in a fascist mindset, according to Bott. And interestingly, the fascist I am theosophy cult overlaps with QAnon considerably in ways that I will share in a bit. On the right, you see the founder of theosophy and the occult, who very much influenced Heinrich Himmler of the Nazi party in his beliefs. So now, finally, a couple more things I want to tell you about some influencers in the QAnon backstory. If you have watched any of the documentaries on QAnon, for example, on Vice or the HBO 6-part miniseries, you'll probably recognize some of the figures on the screen. For example, we have up here in the left corner, Robert David Steele, who is a former intelligence officer who has very prominently advocated QAnon narratives and ideas about the Great Reset. He has been on RT Media. He famously went on Alex Jones and claimed that there were child sex colonies on Mars, prompting a response by NASA that no such things exist. Also, we can see Jim Watkins, the owner of 8chan and 8kun, and his son, Ron Watkins, who in the 6th part of the HBO docuseries, not to be a spoiler, but it was all over the news, seemingly revealed that he played a part in the actual Q posts, potentially even being Q at that time, recognizing that many other individuals over time have likely been involved in promoting that so-called LARP. We also have individuals like here and Lisa Clapier, two individuals who are affiliated or have ties to the I Am cult. We also have YouTuber Tracy Beans, who is an early promoter of the ideas, and who's an associate of through a company called Shadowbox, a reputation management firm. And there was a high-level meeting among Republican operatives involving those two. And over in the left corner, Jason Sullivan, who was a Republican operative who worked for Roger Stone and ran the Power 10 botnet, which for approximately 2 years promoted Republican propaganda on Twitter in violation of Twitter's policies. So having given a bit of, highlighted a few participants behind the scenes recognized in journalistic articles as participants in somehow promoting QAnon, we can also consider one final element of the story, which relates to live action role play or LARPing and alternative reality games. So in cosplay and popular culture, there are elements and folks who enjoy just playing out in real life a character, and this is sometimes associated with trolling. This has become a subculture in a way that has promoted some of the far right and alt-right ideologies. As also another element of QAnon relates to alternative reality games. A number of individuals have noticed similarities between QAnon and immersive game experiences that were deliberately created to evoke a sense of alternative reality. There is one particularly called Cicada 3301, which may have even been a recruitment tool for highly intelligent people to work on. Well, we don't know. We only have some partial answers to that. And numerous journalistic articles have identified a connection between shepherding or promotion of the puzzles and QAnon. So to hear more about that, let's consider the following clip.
In many ways, the connections Jim identifies echo the madness of the QAnon network maps. There are disaffected spies, there is Julian Assange, famous filmmakers, technologists and LARPers, and even secret societies and cults. But there are also links to internet mysteries like Cicada, and ideologies that link back to the libertarian philosophies expressed by the cypherpunks who brought us Bitcoin. Most concerning are connections to a possible real-life occult movement that was the offshoot of the theosophy theory that influenced Heinrich Himmler and the Nazis. It is another rabbit hole.
Cicada was a really interesting, legitimate internet puzzle game that a lot of people played because it involved many cool techniques, cryptography and steganography and cryptocurrency and all this really interesting stuff packaged into an investigation that you needed to do. And you had to be really smart and really good in order to even come close to it. And that was one of the appeals. So it turns out there's a guy named Thomas Schoenberger. He saw the Cicada game as an opportunity to radicalize smart people. And he ended up creating puzzles and calling it Cicada, even though he was not the creator of it.
To this day, no one seems quite sure who the creator of Cicada was. We haven't been able to confirm Thomas Schoenberger's involvement in either Cicada or QAnon.
He's currently thought of as the guru behind Cicada 3301. Cicada was this game that Thomas Schoenberger, basically the term is game jacked from the originators, and is still running it to some extent. In the beginning, it was very much about cryptography and technology and espionage and cool and interesting topics, but in no way political, in no way harmful. What happened when Thomas got on board is that suddenly the themes turned very dark. They turned into artifacts and symbology from the occult, even Nazi symbology. One of the biggest prizes was the Spear of Destiny. It's a Christian symbol, but also used heavily by Hitler and the Nazis.
In many ways, the connection.
We began this investigation to create order from the chaotic world of Q.
The story of Q has evolved one bizarre and outrageous headline at a time over the last few years. And when you consider any of the events or connections we discuss in isolation, they appear random and chaotic. That's what's made Q so hard to understand. But when you look at it from the right perspective, it all starts to make sense and we see what a single headline cannot.
In examining each of our theories, we've come to the conclusion that they're not mutually exclusive.
We do not believe Q is an individual, but rather a network of individuals, each playing their role, from the general to the anons, the bakers, the artists, and even the critics, which have all enabled Q to leap from the message board into the streets.
We believe the account has changed hands over time. Originating in 2017, we think Q was launched as a pro-Trump LARP designed by the Cicadas under Thomas's supervision on 4chan. Shortly after, Tracy Beans and his Patriot Soapbox crew expanded it into a lucrative grift that thrived on 8chan under the Watkins supervision and encouragement.
Which only leaves our final theory, the White House insider. And whether or not you believe that General Flynn was involved in designing Q, since taking the oath, he's made it really difficult to believe that he and those close to him are not currently playing an active role in Q and organizing the Anon.
So now that we have some basics and even some advanced topics around QAnon under our belts, I wanted to tell you in the last 10 minutes or so about studies of Twitter networks of QAnon influencers that have recently been published in Frontiers in Communication. So to hear more about the details, please visit the paper, which should be fully online in just a couple days. So the questions that motivated this research were, to what extent was QAnon a strictly grassroots socio-political movement? Or did it have some boosting, artificial boosting? Also, how much network influence did QAnon linked influencers on Twitter have? Who did they link to? What kinds of topics and interests did those accounts express? To what extent does network traffic reveal links between QAnon and religious themes, spiritual and occult themes, or LARPs and ARGs? And what can Twitter data tell us about how QAnon disinformation became so widespread? A backdrop for these studies relates to digital astroturfing. There's something called political astroturfing from the fake grass. You can see in the picture there. This relates to a centrally coordinated disinformation campaign in which participants pretend to be ordinary citizens acting independently, as in grassroots campaigns. So grassroots, real grass, astroturf, fake grass. Digital astroturfing is a newer form of political astroturfing, one that is more effective in spreading disinformation. So although astroturfing's been around for a long time, the newer digital form is most dangerous. coordinated group activity is a robust hallmark of digital astroturfing, according to recent research, which has brought out more the issue of human actors behind certain LARP accounts, as opposed to merely bot networks. So let me tell you about the first of 5 studies that are described in the paper. I'm going to leave the technical details aside for the most part, which you can find in the paper. In the first study, the goal was to investigate Twitter account properties and networks of QAnon influencers broadly defined. So in this data set, 128 accounts were hand selected for any of the following: either canonical QAnon hashtags and symbols, magical themes or occult themes, interacting with one. There was a lot of that going on. For example, the Snow White 7IM account of Lisa Clappier in the lower right, or account association with a person known or suspected to have furthered or promoted QAnon. So to the extent that journalistic sources and social media have identified some of the people behind these accounts, these accounts were investigated to see, kind of as a historical record, what kinds of social media engagements were they demonstrating. Post hoc, 15 accounts were selected as primary accounts of a special interest, and of which 5 were the individuals shown on the screen below. The first thing I want to tell you about is some initial evidence from the study of artificial account boosting, or astroturfing. This figure shows you a plot of these 128 accounts, approximately, with the days since account creation date on the x-axis. And then on the y-axis, we have the number of followers on a logarithmic scale: 6,000, 60,000, 600,000, and so forth. So what we can see in this log linear plot, we have the line of best fit for that entire data set, and it's clearly there's a significant correlation, significant relationship between the number of an account's followers and that account age overall. But there's something remarkable here. Notice that there are these dashed lines which reflect accounts that were created less than 3 years old for the orange line, or less than a year and a half ago for the gray line. And both of those have a much steeper slope. And that is reflecting the fact that accounts that are less than 3 years old gain followers significantly faster than those that were greater than 3 years old. It's kind of interesting that the QAnon socio-political conspiracy movement was approximately 3 years old at the time of this data collection. So the fact that new accounts are so rapidly gaining followers is indicative of account coordination and provides some initial evidence of astroturfing. I want to also point out some of the remarkable accounts. Here's QAnon 76, which had almost 600,000 followers. And then 2 of the younger accounts, the Friend, a very prominent account that rapidly gained followers, and Judith Rose 91, 2 very high profile pro-QAnon accounts that were highly boosted. And here is a network of the 15 primary accounts of interest. And what we can see is a lot of traffic going among these accounts. So over here, we can see that the account for Jim Watkins was interacting quite a bit with the Friend, as well as an account that at the time I collected the data was not known to me, but it was later revealed that that is a far-right neo-Nazi individual named Mike Panovich, who also has a YouTube channel of the same name. Ironically, he goes by Enoch. So he was interacting, Watkins was interacting with him, Jason Sullivan was interacting with the Friend and Jim Watkins, and we have some other high-profile individuals also communicating with these notable influencers. Study 2 was a larger sample of Twitter accounts, and these were individuals that had a strong online presence. Also in the sample were hand-selected accounts promoting New Age themes or esoteric occult type themes, as well as some QAnon insiders who may not have a strong online presence but had Twitter accounts. So the goal was to determine to what extent do the accounts blend themes. If there was account coordination, then we should see systematic juxtaposition of accounts that that are exhibiting certain kinds of political themes. And this was done using a keyword analysis of the text in the profile to look for conservative keywords, QAnon keywords, or New Age keywords to determine the extent to which there was mixing within and across accounts, and to see if there was further evidence of astroturfing in this larger sample. NodeXL Pro was used to download Twitter data, and this was collected in late October 2020. So what we can see here is a graph of these 1,028 accounts, and any account that has a designation of Q indicates that there was a QAnon themed word in the profile of the account. For example, WWG1WGA, Storm, and so forth. N relates to accounts that show a New Age or occult themed word. You can see that a number of accounts show blending of themes. C indicates a conservative keyword like MAGA or some religious words. And we can see a lot of blending of these themes. Another analysis focused on a subset of accounts that considerably interacted with one another. And without going into details, this was showing clear account coordination where the natural patterns of account behaviors do not apply. For example, we would expect that that older accounts would have more followers, but some of the youngest accounts had the most followers. So this is showing very heavy coordination, lots and lots of links among the accounts in this subnetwork that were coordinating and talking about various things related to QAnon and media content. Studies 3 and 4 elaborated on this work, where study 3 focused particularly on an influencer account that was very prominently pro-QAnon, very visible, went by the appellation Wyatt. It tweeted a lot of anti-Semitic content, as well as some pro-Hitler, pro-Satan type messages. It would get knocked down by Twitter and come back. I caught it when it was using a handle called CEO of Gen Z. And the goal with this third study was to establish that accounts promoting and interacting with this pro-QAnon anti-Semitic account were highly networked to each other and also promoted QAnon. That was shown in study 3. I'm going to just leave that for you as a teaser. But the study 3 then was the basis for study 4, having established that CEO of Gen Z was had followers that were interacting with one another and themselves promoting QAnon, also closely linked to spirituality and ARG networks. Study 4 examined the relation of CEO of Gen Z to a wider set of accounts, and this was just after January 6th. This included other pro-QAnon accounts and ARG-themed accounts. And these are the results of that study. We can see, interestingly, the account that was most influential in the network, as based on a metric called eigenvector centrality, was Snow White 7IM, which was Lisa Clapier's account. Also, Faisal Lazarus was the handle being used at that time by. Both of these accounts were quite prominent in the network, and we can see that CEO of Gen Z had a lot of connections to many of these accounts, some of which were interacting with Faisal Lazarus, some of which were interacting with Snow White 7IM, many of which were coming from the spirituality themed accounts and networks, as well as ARG themed accounts. We even have some Russian accounts that were caught here in the mix, and showing some demonstrations there of connectivity. So the takeaway from these studies is that, first of all, QAnon was not a strictly grassroots socio-political movement. Instead, it was boosted on Twitter through digital astroturfing. That goes against the claims of some journalists at the time. This is the first data set to show that existence of digital astroturfing for QAnon propaganda on Twitter. Also, network traffic revealed interactions among accounts showing QAnon themes, as well as religious and conservative themes, spiritual and occult themes, LARPs and ARGs, and even Russian language and media. On that point, there was a prominent account called Vincent Crypt 46, which was in some of the analyses, the most influential account in the network samples. That account accidentally tweeted out the Russian word fire one day, apparently seeming to want to communicate a fire emoji. Other accounts then rapidly came back in. One even posted a translation of an English news clip in Russian showing the word fire, trying to give a hint apparently to Vincent Crypt 46 that he might have been in Russian keyboard mode. And finally, a takeaway is that an influential anti-Semitic pro-QAnon account, CEO of Gen Z, was heavily retweeted and influential within networks of spirituality and ARG-themed accounts. This is only one example of intersections between QAnon and the far right in Twitter data. Also, the other example I mentioned was the prominence of the Eleno Klee account for white nationalist Mike Pinovich. And that is going to be about the conclusion of my talk. What this shows and the takeaways are, first of all, clear evidence of digital astroturfing of QAnon propaganda on Twitter. We can also consider that QAnon was furthered by collaborations among multiple individuals and entities. These likely included Russia, corporate entities, other nation state actors. I was watching QAnon Brazil shoot up and QAnon UAE and Saudi Arabia. Also the actions of cyber mercenaries, possibly even. And finally, we have to be aware of the complexity of these media and information environments, because effective handling by societies of disinformation and radicalization tactics does require an awareness of complex and emerging technological and narrative landscapes, and that include digital soldiers and cyber warriors, digital mercenaries, and digital influence warfare campaigns. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge individuals that have contributed to this research and the presentation. Very grateful for all of the support. And I'm very happy to take questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Dilley. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A, and I'll go ahead and read the first one and the second one. And please, everybody, feel free to put your question either in the Q&A or in the chat. So the first question: conservative and new age are not terms I generally associate with one another. What accounts for the appeal of blending philosophies that would usually be at odds with one another?
I think that we can consider the historical backdrop of the development of psychographic profiling, which was weaponized and deployed at mass scale in the US election. So companies like Cambridge Analytica have now many competitors. And these companies are also trying to figure out people's individual psychologies and target messages to them. So some people may be drawn to themes around religious conservatism and evangelical lines of thought. Other people are drawn to wellness, spirituality, maybe even mysterious things like the occult. And the most successful campaigns will find ways to shift people's thoughts in the direction of the preferred narratives, regardless of their individual psychologies.
Thank you. The second question comes from John Gray. Thanks for this informative lecture. I wanted to ask you how you dealt with the presence of bot accounts on Twitter. Do the networks of accounts you examined include or exclude accounts that are likely to be bots rather than humans? And generally, how are you thinking about the role of bots in this movement?
Yeah, I think that's an important question. The accounts were hand selected based on their behaviors. The prominent QAnon accounts are almost surely managed. Were almost surely managed by humans due to their prominence, their ability to adapt to new narratives that were coming out from current events and so forth. But bots are surely part of the landscape, and the way in which they boosted QAnon will only be clearer as we proceed to uncover the tracks of nefarious actors. So I don't have a really good answer for you, but certainly bots were probably part of the dynamics. But accounts were selected that had the appearance of human behaviors.
Outstanding, thanks. Please, if anybody else has another question, drop it in the chat or the Q&A. While we're waiting for the next question, I'll ask a question. I'm curious if so you distinguish, for instance, between political astroturfing and digital astroturfing, right? Noting that political astroturfing is something that has been around for a while. And I'm kind of curious if in your research, if you are finding dynamics or strategies or whatever that are perhaps novel and are a function of the technological platforms that people are using to kind of boost signal and amplify some of these things. Are you seeing anything that's like brand new?
I think this is an excellent question. And one of the things that seems to have been in the mix that is novel relates to the role of startup YouTubers or startup influencers on the internet, which is a new phenomenon we haven't seen before. So it appears that people like and Robert David Steele were instrumental in working with those YouTubers, influencing them, maybe motivating them through, if you put our content on, if you put our narrative on, if you allow our people to come on your show and talk about QAnon related narratives, we will incentivize you by giving you likes and follows and subscribes, and we'll promote you. So this is something that was never possible before, and it does seem to have been an important part of how QAnon gathered that critical mass to really take off in the popular ethos.
So something like a symbiotic relationship between each one's getting boosted in its own way by the other, right? That's interesting.
Indeed, yeah. So some of the YouTube channels that had high numbers of followers, like the Tracy Beans channel that already focused on conspiratorial content, those types of outlets were prized. Apparently by the early seeders of this disinformation, and incentives were provided for them to get the message out.
Fantastic. That's really interesting. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Dilley, for your presentation and for answering the questions. I'm really grateful to have you be a part of the University Interdisciplinary Colloquium this year. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we hope that you'll have this time available in a couple of weeks, and you'll be back with us to hear Dr. Peters. Take care and have a great week, everybody.